During this time, this old man will stay on Marshall Gathering Island. Boy, if you have the guts, hide on this island for the rest of your life. Don't even think about sneaking away. I've already placed a bone mark on you. It's seeped into your very bones. No matter where you flee, you won't escape my perception. Himph, since this old man has vowed to take your life, no one can save you. In the sky, Elder Evil Bone's gaze grew dark as he stared at Lin Dong. With a cold sneer, he waved his sleeve and, along with Chen Luo, headed towards the direction of the Wei family on Marshall Gathering Island. As Elder Evil Bone temporarily left, the tense atmosphere in the sky gradually eased. The strong members of the Gu clan exchanged worried glances. Regardless of the outcome, Elder Evil Bone was undoubtedly a troublesome figure to deal with. Gu Shua descended from the sky, pursed his lips, and looked at Lin Dong. Lin Dong, my friend, for now, it's best you stay on Marshall Gathering Island. As long as you remain here, Elder Evil Bone won't dare to make a move. While he may talk tough, that old man can't linger here forever. Lin Dong narrowed his eyes slightly. Elder Evil Bone couldn't stay forever, but neither could he. Not only did he need to find the second ancestral talisman, but he also had to track down Little Mink and Little Yin. Time was not on his side. And the main issue is that you've been marked by Elder Evil Bone's bone mark. If you want to escape his detection, you'll need to get rid of it, Gu Mingqi said. Her beautiful eyes filled with worry as she gazed at Lin Dong. Bone mark, huh? Lin Dong clenched his fists as the primordial energy within him circulated. He could feel a faint, subtle wave deep within his bones. Although it didn't harm his body, it constantly transmitted his location to Elder Evil Bone. Mengqi is right. Lin Dong, regardless of what you plan to do, it's best to stay on the island and get rid of that bone mark first. Afterward, you can slip away quietly, Gu Shua advised. In that case, thank you, Elder Gu Shua. After a brief pause, Lin Dong nodded. He wasn't about to act rashly. Elder Evil Bone was indeed a difficult opponent. Given his current strength, confronting him required caution. No need to thank me. You've helped the Gu clan, so this is what we should do. However, since Elder Evil Bone is tied to the Evil Wind Cave Heaven, if you leave Marshall Gathering Island, the Gu clan won't have any reason to intervene, Gu Shua said, waving his hand. Everyone has to solve their own problems. Lin Dong smiled. He didn't seem overly afraid. The situations he had faced before were beyond what even Gu Shua could imagine. Though Elder Evil Bone was strong, he wasn't yet a threat to force Lin Dong into a desperate corner. Seeing Lin Dong's calm demeanor, Gu Shua didn't say more. After offering a few words of caution, he turned and left. Lin Dong and his group quickly followed. The strong individuals on the island, witnessing the anticlimactic end, felt a bit disappointed. However, they were all curious about how Lin Dong intended to escape his current predicament. Was he really planning to hide on Marshall Gathering Island forever? In the quiet room, Lin Dong sat cross-legged on the bed, eyes shut. Azure light flickered across his body as the primordial energy surged within him. A faint devouring power slowly seeped into his bones, searching for the hidden bone mark. Let's see where you can hide. This search continued for a full half hour before Lin Dong's mind stirred. He had located the mark deep within his bones. There, in the depths of a bone radiating azure light, a faint black glow flickered. That was the bone mark Elder Evil Bone had left inside him. Having found the bone mark, Lin Dong immediately sent his primordial energy to invade it. However, the moment his energy made contact, it began to smoke and was swiftly corroded by the black mark. This sudden change startled Lin Dong. The bone mark was this powerful? The bone mark contains a thin trace of deathly energy. Your primordial energy will be corroded upon contact. The only way to remove it is to use devouring power. A hoarse voice suddenly echoed in Lin Dong's mind. It was the spirit of the ancestral stone. Deathly energy. So that old ghost has indeed touched upon the death mystique stage, Lin Dong muttered. At best, he's barely reached the half-step death mystique stage. But for you, it's still quite tricky to handle, the spirit of the ancestral stone replied. You and he are worlds apart in strength. Even with the devouring ancestral talisman, It will take you several days to remove the bone mark. Meanwhile, Elder Evil Bone will likely notice and take other actions while you're working on it. Lin Dong opened his eyes, a cold glint flashing across them. He sneered, "If that old ghost thinks I'm some soft target, he's in for a surprise." Even a half-step death mystique stage expert was formidable, enough to give Lin Dong a headache. However, he had plenty of hidden cards. If things really escalated, Elder Evil Bone wouldn't come out unscathed either. Half-step death mystique stage. You have something that can counter him, but you lack the necessary materials, the spirit of the ancestral stone suddenly said. What? Lin Dong was taken aback. The heaven-burning cauldron. The heaven-burning cauldron? Lin Dong frowned. That's a pure primordial treasure, but even if I activate the heaven-burning formation, it can only temporarily trap him. The heaven-burning formation is just one of the cauldron's techniques. Its true power lies in the 8 extremes scorching heaven gate. The spirit of the ancestral stone explained. The 8 extremes scorching heaven gate? Lin Dong's eyes lit up with a flash of recognition. You mean the molten gate used by Elder Flame to suppress the alien demon general? Exactly. But to activate the 8 extremes scorching heaven gate, you need the gate seals, right? Lin Dong hesitated. Lin Dong pondered for a moment before asking, what materials are required to craft that formation gate token? 8 active volcanoes will do, responded the spirit of the ancestral stone casually. However, Lin Dong detected a hint of mockery in its tone, causing his expression to darken. After all, he wasn't some old master of the burning heaven gate, possessing terrifying power to forge volcanoes into formation gates. Haha, if you don't have that kind of ability, there's an alternative. You can look for 8 volcanic flame essence stones to craft the gate. Volcanic flame essence stones. Lin Dong muttered to himself before shaking his head in resignation. He had heard of them before. They were the pure essence of volcanic energy, extremely beneficial to those cultivating specialized martial arts. Being extremely rare, these stones were extraordinarily expensive whenever they appeared. Gathering 8 of them would be no easy feat. This suggestion was as good as not having one at all. Are there any other methods? If you can't find the volcanic flame essence stones for now, then you'll have to use something else, said the spirit of the ancestral stone with a sly grin. Give me a reliable suggestion, Lin Dong said helplessly. He didn't want to get his hopes up again for nothing. The flame god ancient token you took from the flame lord, is it still with you? Asked the spirit of the ancestral stone. Lin Dong paused for a moment before clenching his hand, causing a crimson ancient token to appear. Holding it, he felt the intense heat radiating from within. Curiously, he asked, "This is the flame god ancient token? What's it for?" You'll find out its true use when you encounter the owner of the flame ancestral talisman. If they try to harm you, this token will save your life. The owner of the flame ancestral talisman? Lin Dong's eyes narrowed. He had heard that the man's name was Emo Luo, a powerful figure and lord of the Chaos Demon Sea. But let's not worry about that now. First, we need to deal with the immediate issue at hand. Listen to me. We can set a trap for that old ghost. Lin Dong rubbed his nose, sensing a hint of excitement in the spirit of the ancestral stone's voice. His expression became somewhat odd. Had this spirit grown restless after sleeping for so long? Still, that might not be a bad thing. In the room, Lin Dong's eyes glinted coldly as he absorbed the information relayed to him by the spirit of the ancestral stone. Slowly, a frosty smile began to form on his lips. Are you leaving tomorrow? When Gu Mengqi heard Lin Dong say this, a look of shock surfaced on her delicate face. She furrowed her brows and stared at the young man before her, saying, "If you leave Martial Gathering Island, Elder Evil Bone will definitely make a move against you." Though Lin Dong had already defeated Shintaju, proving his strength, the current Elder Evil Bone was on a completely different level compared to younger generation talents like Shintaju. Staying here isn't a long-term solution. As for Elder Evil Bone, I'll figure out how to deal with him, Lin Dong smiled and replied. After discussing with the spirit of the ancestral stone, Lin Dong no longer feared Elder Evil Bone as much. He knew that escaping from Martial Gathering Island without confronting him would be impossible. Gu Mingqi frowned deeply, her eyes fixed on Lin Dong. She couldn't understand where his sudden confidence came from. How could he believe he could take on someone as formidable as Elder Evil Bone, a seasoned powerhouse with an infamous reputation across the celestial Windsea region? Lin Dong, meanwhile, met her gaze with a calm smile. After a brief silence, Gu Mingqi finally averted her eyes with a sigh. Since you've already made up your mind, I won't try to stop you. However, if things get out of hand, feel free to return to Martial Gathering Island. Our Gu clan will provide you with shelter. Thank you, Lin Dong said sincerely. Although their relationship had initially been one of mutual interest, her willingness to support him now left him with a favorable impression. Also, if you're looking for maps of unknown sea regions, you should consider heading to the Celestial Merchant region. It's the most prosperous area in the Celestial Windsea region and nearby seas. Every 6 months, there's a massive Celestial Merchant auction where you might find what you're looking for, Gu Mingqi added. Celestial Merchant region? Celestial Merchant auction? Lin Dong was briefly stunned before a wave of excitement washed over him. Maps of unknown seas were precisely what he needed at the moment, and such maps could likely only be found at large-scale auctions. There's still 1 month left until the next Celestial Merchant auction. I've marked the route on the Chaos Demon Sea map for you, Gu Mingqi said thoughtfully. Thank you again, Lin Dong expressed his gratitude, clearly moved by her kindness. It's an investment, Gu Mingqi replied with a sweet smile. I believe you'll eventually rise to become a prominent figure in the Chaos Demon Sea. By helping you now, I'm simply securing a connection for the future. Lin Dong chuckled and nodded firmly, saying, Rest assured, Lady Mingqi, if there's anything I can do to help in the future, I will do my utmost to assist. Gu Mingqi chuckled softly. She then raised her head, gazing at the young man before her with her bright, beautiful eyes. In a gentle voice, she said, Take care. Lin Dong nodded with a smile. Turning his head, he looked towards another part of Martial Gathering Island, a cold glint gradually rising in his eyes. Old ghost, you want my life? Let's see if you have what it takes to claim it. The next day, as the sun pierced through the thick clouds and illuminated Martial Gathering Island, a streak of light shot out from the Gu clan's residence. Traveling at incredible speed, it headed straight for the outskirts of the island. In another part of the Gu clan's estate, Gu Shuo gazed at the rapidly disappearing figure. He's always been cautious in his actions. I'm sure he has his own plans this time too, Gu Mingqi softly remarked from behind. Elder Evil Bone is a half-step death mystique stage expert. No matter what tricks Lin Dong has, can he really contend with him? Gu Shuo shook his head. Gu Mingqi fell silent for a moment, then raised her head and muttered, Who can say? Heh, so you can't hold back anymore, huh? At the same time that Lin Dong made his move, Elder Evil Bone, who was conversing with a Wei family elder in one of their courtyards, suddenly raised his head, his gaze fixed in the direction Lin Dong had fled. A cold, sinister smile crept across his aged face. Master, is that brat trying to run? Chen Luo, standing behind Elder Evil Bone, grinned and asked, Him. Elder Evil Bone nodded. He then stood up, gripping his white bone staff. You stay here. I'll take care of him myself. Heh, we'll be here waiting for the good news. The Wei family elder smiled faintly. Lin Dong had caused their family to lose face at the martial gathering, so seeing him in trouble now was something they were more than happy to enjoy. He's just a youngster, Elder Evil Bone said casually. Without further words, he waved his sleeve, and in a flash of gray light, his figure shot into the sky, pursuing Lin Dong at an astonishing speed. Chen Luo and Wei Jin watched as Elder Evil Bone disappeared into the distance, exchanging a knowing smile. Their expressions were full of schadenfreude. If Lin Dong had stayed hidden on Martial Gathering Island, things might have been tricky, but now that he had chosen to leave, it was as if he were walking straight into his own demise. Swoosh! Across the vast ocean, a streak of light tore through the air with incredible speed. The force was so great that it not only ripped through the sky, but also left a deep water trail in its wake. This streak of light was, of course, Lin Dong, having just left Martial Gathering Island. The azure dragon wings had already been summoned on his back, clearly pushing his speed to its very limits. The salty sea breeze whipped against his clothes, making them flutter violently. Lin Dong raised his gaze towards the endless horizon, took a deep breath, and asked in his heart, "Are we ready?" The spirit of the ancestral stone responded calmly, though a trace of excitement lingered in its voice. "Do you have a name, ancestral stone?" Lin Dong suddenly asked. "A name?" The spirit of the ancestral stone seemed momentarily taken aback by the random question. After a brief pause, it replied, "My previous master called me Yin." Yin. Lin Dong murmured the name softly before nodding. He glanced back toward the distant horizon, and a surge of boldness welled up inside him. So what if he's at the half-step death mystique stage? If that old ghost dares to chase me today, I'll make him pay for it. Head northwest. There's an uninhabited island there. We've already put some distance between us and Marshall Gathering Island, Yin reminded him again. Also, that elder evil bone is closing in. He'll probably catch up in about half an hour. Got it. Lin Dong nodded, and with a sudden flap of the azure dragon wings, a dragon's roar resounded from within him. His body erupted in a brilliant azure light, transforming into a streak of blue energy that shot towards the northwest with terrifying speed. After another 10 minutes of high-speed flight, an island appeared on the horizon. It was a desolate place with no signs of life. Lin Dong surveyed the island briefly before descending onto a mountaintop. Sitting cross-legged, he took a deep breath, and a gleam of fiery determination surged in his eyes. With a flip of his hand, the heaven-burning cauldron appeared, its crimson glow pulsing like rising flames. Elder Evil Bone, even the 3 headmasters of Yuan's sect couldn't take my life. You, a mere half-step death mystique stage, are far from qualified to try. If it's a fight you want, then I'll give you a fight to the end. Lin Dong lifted his gaze, staring at the distant sky, a fierce glint flashing in his eyes. He waited in silence for several more minutes. Then, from far away, the sound of rushing wind approached. Lin Dong's eyes snapped open as a gray streak tore through the air, finally appearing above the island. As the light faded, the figure of Elder Evil Bone, clutching his white bone staff, emerged. Hovering in midair, Elder Evil Bone's gaze swept over Lin Dong below. His eyes were full of mockery as he commented indifferently, "You picked a fine place to die." Lin Dong took another deep breath of the salty air, his eyes burning with intensity. He grinned, baring his teeth. "Old Ghost Evil Bone, this place, it's for you." As soon as his words fell, the heaven-burning cauldron in Lin Dong's hand rapidly expanded, transforming into a massive cauldron hundreds of feet tall. It floated in midair, emitting waves of terrifying energy that rippled across the surroundings. The enormous crimson cauldron hovered in the sky, its surface shimmering with red light like blazing flames, distorting the air around it with its heat. A pure primordial treasure, huh? Elder Evil Bone's eyes were cold as he gazed at the heaven-burning cauldron, a sneer forming on his lips. "So, that's why you dared to leave Marshall Gathering Island. You think a treasure like this will save you? How naive." "Naive or not, we'll find out soon enough." Lin Dong replied with a cold smile of his own. "Foolish brat. Do you really think beating Shun Tu qualifies you to act arrogant in front of me? Fine. Today, I'll teach you a lesson on behalf of your elders. In the Chaos Demon Sea, you'd better keep your head down if you don't have the strength. Being this reckless will get you killed without even knowing how. Knock me down? I'm afraid you're not qualified, old man." Lin Dong grinned. "You sharp-tongued little beast. You're asking for death." Elder Evil Bone's eyes flared with rage, a flash of killing intent passing over his face. He took a step forward, and an overwhelming surge of primordial energy erupted, stirring the sea below into monstrous waves 100 feet high, the sight terrifying. Boom. However, Lin Dong showed no fear in the face of this. Instead, he made the first move. With a shift in his hand seal, the heaven-burning cauldron lit up in red, tilting its mouth to release a massive pillar of crimson light that enveloped Elder Evil Bone, attempting to suck him into the cauldron. "Trying to pull me in? It won't be that easy." Sensing the suction force, Elder Evil Bone sneered. Although he didn't fear any of Lin Dong's methods, he was sly enough to know that entering the heaven-burning cauldron would cause unnecessary complications, troubles he didn't wish to invite. With a sweep of his sleeve, boundless primordial energy rippled around him like a vast ocean, forcefully resisting the suction. Seeing this, Lin Dong's expression remained calm. With a thought, a sudden jet of water shot up from the sea below, and a shadowy figure darted toward Elder Evil Bone. A puppet? And such a weak one, too? You dare to use this to make a fool of yourself? This unexpected move caused Elder Evil Bone to pause briefly. When he saw what the shadow was, a look of disdain flashed across his face. The shadow was none other than Lin Dong's last demon corpse, but its power had barely reached the minor completion of the life mystique stage. Clearly no threat to Elder Evil Bone. But Lin Dong didn't need it to be. Explode! As the shadowy figure streaked toward Elder Evil Bone, Lin Dong gave a mental command, and a violent surge of energy erupted from within the corpse. In the next instant, the body exploded with a thunderous roar. Boom! Boom! The savage shockwave blasted out, forcing Elder Evil Bone to retreat a step. The force also caused a ripple in his defensive primordial energy, momentarily weakening the resistance against the suction of the heaven-burning cauldron. Shing! Lin Dong's eyes gleamed as he seized the brief opening. The heaven-burning cauldron shot forward, its crimson mouth gaping like a ferocious beast, swallowing Elder Evil Bone whole. Thud! 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 After devouring Elder Evil Bone, the cauldron trembled violently, indicating that the old man was wreaking havoc inside. With a focused thought, Lin Dong rushed into the heaven-burning cauldron. On the vast, crimson-hued ground within, he found Elder Evil Bone, his expression dark and ominous. You little brat. You really were willing to sacrifice your puppet. Elder Evil Bone glared at Lin Dong with a sinister look. Sometimes you have to lose something to catch the wolf. Sacrificing a puppet to trap a half-step death mystique stage expert is worth it. Lin Dong chuckled. You arrogant fool. You think trapping me inside this pure primordial treasure will hold me? Elder Evil Bone's eyes grew colder. In a flash, his figure blurred, and ghostly shadows flickered across the sky. Suddenly, he appeared before Lin Dong, his palm brimming with terrifying primordial energy, slamming down toward him. Whoosh! Space twisted around Lin Dong as radiant crimson light surged forth, weaving into a shield. Though the shield was shattered by Elder Evil Bone's strike, Lin Dong used the brief moment to retreat far away. Inside the heaven-burning cauldron, Lin Dong enjoyed its protection, allowing him to maneuver and bide his time, waiting for the perfect moment to unleash his final move. Elder Evil Bone's hand trembled as he swirled his bone staff, which transformed into a cold, piercing white light. It tore through the air at an unimaginable speed, hurtling toward Lin Dong's head. Lin Dong swiftly retreated, summoning a black staff with a flick of his wrist. Infusing it with primordial energy, he swung it forward, colliding with the bone staff. Clang! A metallic clang echoed as the black staff was deflected, spiraling powerlessly to the ground. However, the bone staff was also knocked off course, embedding itself deep into the earth, creating massive fissures in the ground. You slippery brat! Elder Evil Bone's face darkened. Lin Dong was cunning, always evading direct confrontation. Clearly, Lin Dong understood the gap in their strength and wisely chose to avoid head-on clashes. But do you really think you can outrun me? Elder Evil Bone's expression grew even more sinister as tendrils of gray mist began seeping from his body. Enveloped in the mist, his form gradually became faint and ethereal. Sensing the shift, Lin Dong felt a sudden twinge of danger and immediately retreated again. Shing! Just as Lin Dong moved, Elder Evil Bone stepped forward, shrouded in gray mist. In an instant, he appeared before Lin Dong, his twisted grin flashing. His 5 fingers curled into a claw, thin wisps of black energy swirling around his fingertips. Like a ghostly claw, his hand pierced through the void, reaching for Lin Dong. Boom! Boom! With a single grasp, the space around Lin Dong cracked under the sheer power, revealing the terrifying strength of Elder Evil Bone. Azure Dragon Celestial Seal. Lin Dong's expression grew solemn as he faced Elder Evil Bone's attack. Without hesitation, azure light erupted around him. 10 dragon marks surged up from his body, coalescing into a massive dragon-shaped palm print that shot forward with immense force. As the two forces collided, a terrifying surge of energy swept wildly across the sky. The dragon seal, which had condensed the power of 10 azure dragon light patterns, shattered in an instant. Lin Dong's body was sent flying backward, landing somewhat awkwardly on the ground with a muffled groan escaping his throat, clearly shaken by the impact. To think you could withstand an attack from me, boy. Even if you die today, you should be proud. Elder Evil Bone exclaimed in surprise when he saw that Lin Dong had endured his strike. His strength far surpassed Lin Dong's by several levels, and the previous claw strike could have easily killed a master of the minor completion of the life mystique stage, let alone someone of Lin Dong's level. This boy must be eliminated. Elder Evil Bone's eyes glinted with a sudden murderous intent. If Lin Dong could already reach such power at his current level, what would happen if he advanced to the great completion or even perfect completion of the life mystique stage? He might become a threat too great to handle. This future danger could not be left unchecked. Without further hesitation, Elder Evil Bone launched himself at Lin Dong once again, tearing through the sky like an eagle diving for its prey. You old bastard, taste the power of my heaven-burning cauldron. Burning sky chains. Lin Dong looked up, a fierce expression crossing his face. He bent low, slamming his palms heavily onto the ground. Rumble. As his palms struck the earth, the ground quaked violently. The earth split open, and over 100 crimson beams of light shot up from the cracks, transforming into enormous red chains that swiftly wrapped around the diving gray shadow of Elder Evil Bone. The fiery chains shot through the sky like blazing dragons, coiling around the approaching gray silhouette from all directions. The sudden change caused Elder Evil Bone to pause momentarily, but he quickly regained his composure, letting out a cold snort. His hands curled into claw shapes, and with a fierce swipe, 10 dark energy streaks slashed through the air, slicing the crimson chains into pieces. Boom, boom. Lin Dong's eyes remained icy as his palms stayed pressed to the ground. A continuous surge of primordial energy flowed into the earth, causing more and more crimson chains to burst forth and relentlessly attack Elder Evil Bone. Despite Lin Dong's relentless onslaught, Elder Evil Bone stood atop the void, swiping away the chains with ease. Not a single chain could get close to him. You think this weak tactic can trap me? What a fool's dream. Elder Evil Bone sneered as he looked down at Lin Dong. Ignoring the taunt, Lin Dong's focus remained sharp. Another dozen crimson chains shot up from the ground, wrapping around Elder Evil Bone in a flash. Pointless. With a swift claw attack, Elder Evil Bone easily severed the new chains. However, this time, as the chains snapped, Lin Dong's lips curled into a cold smile. Whoosh! From the broken ends of the chains, smaller chains shot out, darting through the air like venomous snakes. They quickly coiled around Elder Evil Bone's limbs and body. Break! Elder Evil Bone's expression darkened, and a surge of primordial energy erupted from his body, attempting to shatter the chains. Crack! 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 But this time, the black chains, glowing faintly with dark light, held firm. Though they creaked under the strain, they stubbornly kept Elder Evil Bone bound. What? Elder Evil Bone's face changed for the first time. He could hardly believe it. His immense power couldn't break these seemingly fragile chains. You old bastard. Looks like you underestimated me after all, Lin Dong said, looking up at the bound Elder Evil Bone. These chains were imbued with devouring power, far stronger than the crimson chains. Even with Elder Evil Bone's strength, breaking free wouldn't be easy. Boy, don't be so arrogant. Even if I can't move, killing you is still child's play. Elder Evil Bone's voice was ice-cold. He stomped down in the air, unleashing a colossal beam of primordial energy, 100 meters long, aimed directly at Lin Dong. Swish, swish, swish. The red chains danced wildly, forming a net above Lin Dong, blocking the incoming energy attack. "You old bastard, if you're done playing tough, why don't you try the real feast I've prepared for you?" With a grin that was both mocking and menacing, Lin Dong watched as the crimson chains snapped and fell from the sky. He raised his head, his eyes locked onto Elder Evil Bone, his smile becoming even more sinister. "Arrogant brat," Elder Evil Bone muttered, his pupils narrowing as he continued to stare at Lin Dong. Despite his cold words, a sense of unease crept into his heart. It felt as though everything Lin Dong had done today had been part of a larger plan. Lin Dong grinned back without a word. He knew this was his only chance to land a fatal blow after finally binding this old monster. With a sharp breath, Lin Dong exhaled a cloud of white mist. His hand clenched, and in the next moment, a crimson ancient token appeared, glowing like fire. It was the Flame God ancient token. Lin Dong's gaze burned as he focused on the token. With a thought, it began to rise slowly. As it ascended, wisps of crimson flame ignited from it, distorting the surrounding space with an intense heat that made the primordial energy in the area boil. Elder Evil Bone's face darkened as he gazed at the ancient token that had risen into the air, its surface blazing with flames that made even him feel a twinge of fear. Several mouthfuls of essence blood infused with pure primordial energy spurted from Lin Dong's mouth, landing squarely on the Flame God ancient token. At the same time, the primordial energy in his body surged out completely, pouring into the token. A pale hue quickly spread across Lin Dong's face, and his aura began to wither at an alarming rate. It was clear that activating the Flame God ancient token had nearly drained all his strength. However, under such consumption, the crimson flames on the Flame God ancient token grew even more intense, until finally, they turned as red as blood. Flame-burning heaven and earth arrow. Lin Dong's eyes blazed as he looked at the ancient token engulfed in blood-red flames. With a swift change of his hand seal, a deep voice rumbled from his throat. Buzz. As his voice fell, the blood-red flames on the Flame God ancient token shot skyward, transforming into a long blood-colored arrow. The arrow, about 10 feet in length, was drenched in flames that dripped like blood. As the fiery tendrils flickered, a nearly apocalyptic wave of destructive energy quietly spread through the air. Under this pressure, even Elder Evil Bone's pupils contracted instantly, and a look of terror surged from the depths of his eyes. He could hardly believe that Lin Dong could summon such a terrifying attack. Lin Dong gazed at the visibly shaken Elder Evil Bone, his pale face twisted in a grimace. He mimed pulling a bowstring, and in the next moment, his eyes turned icy cold, and his fingers suddenly released. Screech. The instant Lin Dong's fingers let go, the blood-red flaming arrow emitted an ear-piercing screech. Under the force of that screech, even space itself was torn apart. The arrow vanished in a flash, as though piercing through the barriers of space, hurtling straight toward Elder Evil Bone's skull. Boom. Every hair on Elder Evil Bone's body stood on end at that moment. His shadowed, ancient face twisted with fear as a torrent of primordial energy erupted from his body. He finally shattered the black chains that had bound him, and without a second thought, he attempted to retreat at breakneck speed. The blood-red arrow carried with it a palpable threat of death. Too late to run now. Lin Dong sneered as he watched Elder Evil Bone's attempt to escape. This attack had drained him to the point where he could only use it once, and afterward, he would be left vulnerable for quite some time. If Elder Evil Bone managed to evade it, Lin Dong would be utterly defenseless. This arrow could not miss. Lin Dong's hands moved in a blur, rapidly forming hand seals. His immense spiritual energy surged from his Niwen palace, and a cold, low voice rang out from his mouth. Freeze! A strange ripple spread from the sky in an instant, and to his horror, Elder Evil Bone realized that his body had frozen for just a moment. This momentary stillness was almost imperceptible, but it was undeniably real. In ordinary circumstances, it might go unnoticed, but now, it was a fatal instant. Whoosh! The blood-red flaming arrow shot through space, and in the next moment, It reflected in Elder Evil Bones' horrified eyes as it struck his body with brutal force. Boom.